All right, so this is the National International Center for Empowerment Volunteer Orientation. I do ask that you try to use video if you can, if you feel comfortable doing that. We understand that not everyone's comfortable being in front of camera, and that's okay. But as often as possible, please try to keep your video up. It's more engaging, and I know I'm definitely guilty of turning off my video when I'm in another meeting that might require less attention. We just want to make sure that everyone is engaged. Also, please turn off your notifications for this presentation in case you're talking. It can drown out what someone's speaking, or drown out what you're saying and distract, make a loud noise and everything. If you're not actively speaking, please mute yourself to avoid background noise. And if you have any questions, you can always use chat, or you can speak out loud and raise your hand, and I'll get to you when we're at a good stopping point. If you do have to step away, please let me know and just put that in the chat so I don't call on you if we're doing an activity or something like that. All right, so NICE is a refugee resettlement site, which means that we are responsible for bringing refugees into the country, transitioning them in their first 90 days of being in the United States, setting up an apartment for them, picking them up at the airport, helping them get a social security card, getting their kids enrolled in school, doing cultural orientation, and there's a lot of other parts of that process that aren't mentioned there. We also have other programs that support our families after the first 90 days that we're going to be talking about later in the presentation. All the programs share a common goal of ensuring that refugees and immigrants achieve their full potential now and for generations to come. To do this, we have programs like multi-generational literacy, where kids and parents meet together to improve reading. We also understand how important financial security is, and has a multi-generational effect. So self-sufficiency is a secondary goal of ours. It's basically just a governmental term that we use to measure the effectiveness of our programs. But really, it just means that our clients are able to support themselves in the long term and have sustainable income. Our direct quoting our actual mission is to eliminate the root causes of poverty within the Greater Nashville's refugee and immigrant community. The creation of opportunities for upward socioeconomic mobility and the social integration of those it serves. So how we began was we were founded by Dr. Gatulik Thak, and you can see the picture of his left was taken in Ethiopia in a refugee camp. He was originally a South Sudanese refugee. He was a child soldier, and he fled to Ethiopia and lived a lot of his adolescence and young adulthood in Ethiopia. He and his brother, who's in the picture with him, and I think he's in the yellow suit, eventually resettled in the Midwest in South Dakota. It was a bit of a climate shock, as you can imagine, coming from, around the equator to South Dakota, very cold, and a culture shock as well. Definitely different than Ethiopia and South Sudan. They lived together in the Midwest for some time, and Dr. Gat was taking English classes online and working 2 jobs to put his brother through school. He did not get a formal education until later. He earned his GED after his brother completed high school and eventually his doctorate. He's also a published author, so we are very excited to have him as the founder. He's very engaged and cares a lot about the refugee community here, being a part of it himself. So after he lived in the Midwest for a while, Dr. Gat resettled again in Nashville. At that point, he had enough sense of security. He went back to the refugee camp where he spent his adolescence and found a woman that he had met and fallen in love with years ago. He brought her back to the United States, and now they have their home here in Nashville. The picture to the right is their family. It was over their kitchen table that Dr. Gat began teaching his wife English for the first time. Once word got out that he was holding English lessons, their friends and neighbors started joining in. Eventually, their group got so big that Dr. Gat realized that there needed to be more support in Nashville for his community. So NICE was founded by a group of Sudanese refugee men and women, including the current director, Dr. Gatulik Thak, desiring to help other refugees and immigrants living in Middle Tennessee. The experiences of these founders, most of whom came to the US in the 1990s from war-torn Sudan, prompted the creation of NICE, an attempt to provide others with skills and facilitate independence and self-sufficiency in their home. It was originally named the Sudanese Community and Women's Services Center, and it was renamed NICE in order to fully represent the services we provide and the community we serve. Since our founding, we have served people from more than 72 different nations living in Middle Tennessee, and the majority of whom have been Asian, African, and Middle Eastern descent. Fun fact, NICE was actually named by a volunteer. We had a competition, our little people submitted names that they wanted to see how we could best represent our community. And NICE was one of the names. National International Center for Empowerment was one of the names that our volunteer submitted, and it has become our name ever since. And it really represents who we are in the national community, and we want to serve everybody. Specifically, most of our employees are actually refugees themselves. So employees speak a total of 32 different languages. We have people from countries like Iraq, Myanmar, Afghanistan, Syria. Most recently, we've had a lot of clients from Somalia and Congo, and most Congolese from Uganda, Burundi, and Malawi. We also have several staff members from Rwanda, but we typically don't really serve Rwandan refugees. A majority of our clients are through education. We actually see over 1,000 clients in education alone. We have about 850 adult clients and 250 youth per year. That's a little bit different right now because we are online, but we're still serving a very large amount of adult clients and less students at the moment, less youth. So we have 6 core programs: resettlement, employment, health, education, development, and immigration. So the major department is education, as I mentioned earlier, about 1,000 clients just from education. You don't actually have to be a previous client to participate or even be a refugee or immigrant. We open our programs to anyone who needs them: adult ESL, after school, citizenship training, and high school courses like for the high school equivalency test, HiSET, which is 8th grade to education up to high school. In citizenship, we do lessons related to civics, interview practice, and ensure the clients know the difference between different terms and how this can affect their application. So for example, knowing the difference between whether or not a client may not have multiple wives and what that could mean as far as gaining citizenship and literacy components. I was sat on a citizenship class a couple weeks ago, and one of the teachers was speaking about the differences between like terrorism and guerrilla groups, so that they make sure that our clients know that they're not part of that, and they were never been part of that. And we have to make sure they understand what that means. So when a agent asks a question, they don't accidentally say, "Oh yes, I was in a guerrilla group," not realizing that's can hinder their application when they were never part of one to begin with. The second program is employment. We help provide work during the first 90 days in country, but we also up to 5 years after arrival. We serve refugees, asylees, and immigrants in this program. Because this can be pretty restrictive in who we can serve, we also have the New American Staffing Agency, which actually was just set up, and it's a for-profit branch of our nonprofit organization. It's funded by organizations looking to hire specifically from the refugee and immigrant community. So we also have services within the employment program, like workforce preparation, including skills, inventories, job searches, how to do online and paper applications, resume building, interview prep, and weekly job training classes, which can be super, super vital for our clients, especially right now when a lot of them are not finding work. The third core program is health. So following the development of the Nashville Refugee Health Initiative in 2013, NICE developed a health program to provide education to the refugee and immigrant communities in Middle Tennessee. We mostly serve clients through intensive case management, getting health insurance, finding doctors, taking clients to their appointments. And it consists of, basically the health program consists of 4 components, which is the Wellness Partner Program, monthly nutrition classes, weekly fitness classes, and monthly health screenings. We do typically use a lot of volunteers for this program, especially the nutrition classes and the fitness classes. Health screenings, we need a lot of people, but because we're not actually offering in-person services right now, a lot of these programs have been suspended. So we're mostly just doing case management, filing different clients and submitting them for Medicaid and Obamacare and stuff like that. So the immigration department is mostly paperwork. So a lot of times when our clients want to travel internationally, they have to apply to do that because they're kind of restricted on their travel as part of being the refugee kind of agreement. We also do citizenship applications in the immigration program, and providing interpretation for all services across NICE, case follow-up, and green card applications. Excuse me. We aim to enable our clients to effectively and efficiently transition into life in Middle Tennessee. So we have a Board of Immigration Appeals accredited staff member, and our services also include completing, filing, all the different forms needed for those different services. So our most core program, like I said earlier, we are a refugee resettlement site. Our most core program is the resettlement program. Our team meets clients at the airport, ensures they have a home-cooked meal, and orients new arrivals into their new life. We help meet immediate needs, such as furnishing homes, scheduling initial medical screenings, enrolling children in schools. And through our match grant, refugee cash assistance, refugee medical assistance, and refugee social services programs, we break down the barriers between life as a refugee and self-sufficiency. And the resettlement program is really fundamental in those first 90 days. And then we kind of hand them off to the other programs. Finally, we have the development program, which is how we fund everything else. So through partnerships with corporations, government, individual giving, you can join individual giving through NICE Neighborhood, where you can donate to specific programs. We also have grants from private foundations like Josie Davis, Maddox, and they help support a lot of our other services. When we do marketing and have interns, a lot of interns join that program, but there's not a lot of volunteer opportunities there. So before I move on to the next slide, what would you say is the difference between a refugee, an asylee, and an immigrant? What makes a refugee? And you can answer out loud or in the chat.
For asylum seekers, don't you have to have a really specific threat to your safety from either like a government or a terrorist organization, or some based on your race or class, or a couple different factors? And then refugees are, I'm not sure. So I remember that for asylum.
Yeah, that's a good guess. It's really close, almost there. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide unless anyone else has any other guesses. Okay. So yes, you're right. So it is based, asylees are based off of kind of the specific cases, and whether they're the government or persecution on a case-by-case basis. So it's more individualized, and being a refugee is more of a people group. You're kind of recognized internationally, and we'll go into a bit more detail on that in a second. So the UN High Commissioner for Refugees defines a refugee as a person who flees his or her country and is unwilling or unable to return due to a well-founded fear. The UNHCR goes to different areas and identifies situations that should warrant refugee status. Refugees are then sent to live in camps while they wait for their application to be processed. They work in conjunction with different organizations and host countries who agree to host refugees. So this fear is based on persecution for reasons of race, region, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or for political opinion. It's a very time-consuming process, but it's internationally recognized and it's more permanent. So asylees are like that, except the fact that they arrive on their own, they arrive in the US on their own as students, tourists, or business people without any immigration status at all. After they enter the country, then they can apply to receive asylum, and they might have reasons like a well-founded fear on religion, nationality that's not internationally recognized, and more on a case and an individual basis. They acknowledge and meet the definition of a refugee and are permitted to stay in the United States. So case-by-case basis, that's like how that's defined. And how the United States deals with asylees has changed. So if you are cross the border seeking asylum, you are detained until your case is heard. We typically don't represent asylum cases because they can be really, really tentative, but there have been cases where we work with families. We already know how to get, to get their detained family member help. Once they come into the United States and are granted asylum, then we will end up serving them. But as far as those initial resettlement agency, the first 90 days resettlement times, we tend to serve mostly just refugees. An immigrant, technically asylees and refugees are both immigrants, but for the case of this presentation, we're just going to say that an immigrant is someone who chooses to move to the country and they're not able to return to their home country at any time. So they choose to move and can't really leave, or else they're not going to be able to welcome back. And we serve all three of these groups. So this is kind of a breakdown on a scale of the refugee crisis. In total, there are 70.8 million forcibly displaced people worldwide. Internally, within each country, there could be there's 41.3 million worldwide. Refugees they are displaced and they leave their country, so that's 25.9 million. And asylum seekers is only 3.5 million. So it's far less common to be an asylum seeker. Right now, I will say that Venezuela is the largest asylum-seeking country in the world. There's a process where Venezuelans are able to be recognized as refugees, but many do not choose to do that because the two countries that will host them, that's Colombia and Peru, have a lot of the same persecution issues as Venezuela right now. Peru, for example, absolutely despises Venezuelans and their country because they don't feel like they belong there, and there's a lot of racial tension. So this is a scale of the refugee crisis. So you can see that 57% of refugees came from Syria, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. And the greatest asylum applications from Venezuela were about 350,000 a year and growing. Out of 70 million, 3.9 are stateless people, which means that their nationality is not recognized by the government, like the Rohingya refugees in Myanmar. Of all the statistics, 25.9 million have the status of refugees, but only 92,000 will actually be resettled. That's the most shocking to me because that is less than 1% of refugees will actually end up being resettled in a new host country. So the information presented here shows a total number of refugees who were submitted for resettlement by UNHCR to the United States and who departed for resettlement during the reporting period. So how many applications we receive versus how many actually were resettled. The president determines how many refugees the country will resettle per year. That's the same number that we actually receive from the UNHCR. We will then vet these applicants to determine if the US is the best fit. So 2016 had the largest number of refugees in the history of the resettlement program. Last year, less than 25,000 people, an all-time low. But many programs are not filled because only specific groups of people are actually included. For example, only 5,000 refugees could be from Syria. Some of the requirements from the current administration were that we would accept refugees from countries where there's not a UNHCR presence. And they built these into the processes of determining who could be welcomed into the United States as a barrier for welcoming people. So if we if we say we're going to accept 5,000 refugees from Syria, but there's not a refugee or a UNHCR presence, which there actually is, we can't actually accept those applications. All right, so these are our arrivals and the specific statistics that we have. You can see how they have changed. So in 2016, 2017, we had 287 arrivals within NICE. That dropped to 144 in 2018. Interestingly, in 2019, we were told to only expect 120 new cases, new arrivals, but we were only able to process 194. So it all depends on the categories that are placed into the president's requirements. So who we can resettle has drastically changed since 2016, and I'm just going to walk you through these graphs. So in 2016, 76% of arrivals already had a United States tie. That means they already had someone in the United States who agreed to take responsibility of the refugee when they arrived. They offered emergency housing, supported them financially, and were kind of a connection to the communities already here. In 2019, 95% of cases are required to have US ties. That's not really a big increase, but nominally it's about 100%. So basically everyone now has to have a US tie or be an SIV, or someone who serves in the military like a translator. So on the left side, you will see the countries that we actually serve. In 2017, the list drastically changes. So you can see Sudan, Somalia, Syria, Russia, Eritrea, Bhutan, Burma, Democratic Republic of the Congo, and El Salvador and Iraq. And then it changes so much down to Ethiopia, Bhutan, Burma, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Iraq, and Russia. So much, much smaller. Does anyone have an idea as to why these countries don't show up during the 2017-2018 year?
Or are we more strict on Muslim majority countries?
Yep, that's it. Yeah, so legislation that banned entry from Muslim majority countries are included on this list from previous generations of the resettlement. It didn't just affect traveling, but also resettlement from those countries. All right, so what is the journey like for the lucky 1% who are actually considered refugees? We are telling you this because it's really important to understand a little bit about what our client base experiences, so you can be more emotionally aware when you're interacting with students or whoever you're serving. So first refugees flee their home. It depends how long for that process. It could take a day or a week, months or less. On an instant, you have to ask, okay, what do I need to take? What's important to me, and what do I need to leave behind? In some cases, these aren't just material things, but people in your family. It's not uncommon for people in this step to be sexually assaulted, financially taken advantage of, or injured. Those obstacles have to be taken into consideration when deciding who to take. I work with our middle school program, and one of my students a couple of weeks ago, I think, we asked, all right, well, what would be the first thing that you would do if you went back to your home country? Actually, a lot of students, not just one, a lot of students said they would go and see family members they had to leave behind. Next is the resettlement process. Once you make it into camp, you begin resettlement. And then after you enter the United States, that's what we call preparation and arrival. Okay, so this is this first step of that process. So a family decides to leave home. They have to decide what comes with them, what does not, who comes with them, and who does not. Once they make it into camp, there are three options. A refugee can do local integration, which is when a refugee can choose to integrate into the country where they moved. For example, looking at a Rohingya refugee, once a refugee is resettled in the refugee camp in Myanmar, they can choose to integrate into Myanmar if the government accepts them. This is similar to the asylum status. The country in which they flee is the country in which they stay. The next option is voluntary repatriation. So let's say, for example, that in your country there's a civil war and you're forced to flee because of that war. If the war is resolved in your lifetime, you can volunteer to return to your home country and take back the citizenship and nationality that you were born into. A lot of refugees take this option. The last option is resettlement, which is, like we said earlier, only occurs in about 1% of refugees. This is where you're sent to a third-party country, and that country agrees to host you. They don't have to stay in that country, and they don't have a say in what country they get to go to, and they have very little advance notice. So from the time that you arrive in camp and the time that you arrive to a third-party country, how long do you think a family lives in a temporary camp on average before they're resettled? Get some guesses.
6 months to a year.
Okay.
I would say probably about 18 months.
All right. Any more guesses? All right. Well, it's actually 20 years. So most of the youth that we serve were actually born in refugee camps and spent their entire lives there. So many youth might identify more as Congolese, for example, than Sudanese, because they were born in that country. There's someone actually in our adult education program who moved to refugee camp when he was 5. He spent 20 years there and then came here as a 24-and-a-half-year-old. Now he's 25, trying to catch up on education, adjusting to culture, and learning a new language. Okay, so after they are resettled, they have to go through a screening process. This is what takes so long. So it's done entirely abroad, and your case is not heard immediately. Case review is done in the order that you arrive. So even after you arrive, there's some backup. So it can take 18 months to 3 years for a case to actually be heard the first time. And that's when UNHCR is reviewing your file. So first refugee goes to camp. They meet with the International Office of Migration, and they take any documentation that they brought with them. Many families may not have known what they needed when they left. So if they don't have any documentation or evidence of their name, the International Office of Migration will assign you one. We have a lot of clients who only know the name they were given from their parents, but IOM will assign a name beginning with FNU, first name unknown. And that is your legal name throughout the entire citizenship and refugee process until you actually become a citizen. Then you can change your name to whatever you want it to be. So for example, we had clients who had children who didn't have any documentation, and the IOM named them phonetically 1A and 2B. And that was their name all the way until they were citizens. Or I think they're still, technically that is still their name, they're not citizens yet. So after that, the UNHCR and International Office of Migration screening process, the host country also screens the refugees. This is the longest process because you have to take into account communication, bureaucracy, etc. In the United States, they must have 8 US background checks from the government, 8 government agencies must background check them, screen them, 5 background checks, 6 separate security databases, and 3 in-person interviews. Even if you are an unaccompanied minor, in all of these cases, you often may do it on your own. So for asylee cases, the child is set separately from their parents. So they must go in front of a judge and explain why they should come to the United States as a child. So 5 or 6 years old, trying to defend their right to come to the United States. After this whole process, a family will receive notice that they're coming to the United States, but they're the last to find out. We actually find out first because the government has to know that we have the capacity to host them. Okay, so I have headphones in. I'm not sure if this is going to play, so let me know if you hear it.
This is the Secretary of
Can you hear
Homeland
this?
Security, Jay Johnson. Since the Syrian civil war began, more than 4 million people have fled that country, leaving their entire lives behind them, and the stories we've heard have been heartbreaking. Remember the tragic stories of children who drowned attempting to reach Europe with their families. That's why, once it was concluded that we can do it safely and responsibly, the President announced a plan to resettle at least 10,000 Syrian refugees in the United States within the next year. In the days since the Paris attack, many have tried to argue that accepting Syrian refugees, who by the way are mostly women, children, and families, means that we'd make America a more dangerous place. This ignores the reality that anyone who seeks and is approved for refugee status in the United States must first go through a rigorous security screening process. So let's walk through that process and what it looks like for a potential refugee. Meet Rima. Rima and her children have lost their home in Syria. They've made the dangerous journey out of the country, and now Rima is seeking refugee status in a place where she can keep her children safe. First, Rima must apply for refugee status through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. This is the international organization in charge of protecting and assisting refugees. For Rima to be considered a refugee, she must show that she's been driven from her home due to a, quote, well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group or political opinion, end quote. If Rima meets the above conditions, she may be referred for resettlement in a country such as the United States. But before she can enter the United States as a refugee, Rima must then undergo a security screening process that is more thorough than any other for people entering this country. She'll have a deep background check. Her biographic and biometric information will be cross-checked against law enforcement and intelligence databases. Rima will also have to pass an in-depth interview, including an interview with a specially trained DHS officer to determine her eligibility. If found eligible, she then receives a medical evaluation. From start to finish, this process includes the involvement of the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the Department of Defense. All refugees, including Syrians, go through these security screening measures, and Syrians receive an enhanced review during this process. Over 23,000 Syrian refugee applicants have been referred to us by the UNHCR. Only about 2,000 have been admitted. Throughout history, we've seen that America has become a better nation by welcoming refugees in times of crisis. So many refugees and their children have gone on to make great contributions to our American society. Albert Einstein and Elie Wiesel, two Jews displaced by Nazi Germany, went on to become great Americans. We've seen great athletes such as Nadia Comaneci and Luol Deng flee communism and the Sudanese Civil War, respectively. Taking in refugees at a time of crisis is simply the right thing to do. We can and we will continue to ensure our own security while doing our share to welcome men, women, and children who are refugees fleeing violence. This is the United States of America. We can, we must, and we will do both these things.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that gives a kind of a brief overview of what that looks like, and it gives some interesting information. All right, so refugees vetted by all the different departments, including the State Department, who tends to really take the lead in the case. The State Department then agrees that the family should be resettled. After that, it is sent, the case notes and case is sent to a VOLAG, a volunteer agency. There are 10 that exist across the United States, and they all receive different cases from the State Department. They use funding and information about the family from the State Department to assign a family to a site like NICE. In our case, our VOLAG is ECDC, which stands for Ethiopian Community Development Council. They serve any refugee, but the history originated with the placement of Sudanese refugees in camps in Ethiopia. When we get an assurance saying that we will take care, the plane ticket is booked for the family about a week before they have to leave. They're notified. They sell their possessions, gather what they can, and are sent to us. We're going to sign a lease for them, and we use volunteers to do apartment setup so they have a place that feels like home. Once they get here, we pick them up from the airport. Once they land, they're in their first 90 days of arrival, which is in that resettlement agency, the resettlement programs kind of oh my gosh, I can't think of words today. They're the resettlement agency's services, resettlement part program. So within that process, the resettlement program process, they receive a stipend from the federal government that goes to us so we can pay their bills for them, because oftentimes people we serve are not literate in their own languages, let alone English. We write checks to insurance, power bill, etc. So that stipend only lasts for the first 90 days, but most refugees qualify for RCA, Refugee Cash Assistance, which helps them for up to 8 months after they arrive. That's because they might have trouble finding work once they arrive, or jobs will pay for their entire family. Often refugee families can be really big, have like tons of kids, maybe 8 kids. So a lot of times the jobs that they might receive can't actually afford to feed all of their children and them and rent. So there are other programs like Match Grant from ECDC that match whatever we can give to that family. So that might actually support them more than RCA funding. After the first 90 days, refugees actually receive the bill from their plane ticket, and they must pay it back. And it could take any amount of time to do this, but they have to pay it back as part of their agreement to come to the United States. For example, if a refugee is from Bhutan and resettled in Nepal, that plane ticket is over $1,500 per person. So larger families, like I said, if you had 8 children, are in a pretty big hole already. There are repayment programs, like I said, so you don't pay all the bill as soon as you arrive, but it's very expensive, and when you don't already make a lot of money when you're coming to the United States at first. So now after those 90 days, after all of that, the other departments step in. They've helped find employment, get them a doctor, help them learn English, help families with their children, and again, the goal is self-sufficiency. So at every step that we just talked about, there is trauma. We call this the triple trauma paradigm. We have it from the country of origin, escape, and relocation. So trauma from the country of origin, is experiencing things like civil war or immediate persecution. This could be exposure to violence, political opponents who are targeted, and families killed, being recruited for war. Many of our clients have stories like this, and if you're working in adult programs, you're probably going to hear stories like this eventually once you get to know students. It's not uncommon at all. Next is the trauma of escape, which is being forced to leave home and leave emotional belongings or familial ties behind. They can travel overseas, walk really long distances. There might be death in the group, or they're traveling in, and because of the long and difficult journey, or crimes committed against them. There was one story that I actually heard about a mother dressing up her daughter as a boy for fear that she would be raped. Unfortunately, her daughter was eventually discovered, and you can imagine what happened, especially as a mother coming into the United States. With that story and the daughter is quite traumatic. Then there's also the trauma of living in camps. Oftentimes these camps can be dangerous because there is not law enforcement. One of our clients was blinded in the camp because she was attacked when she was picking oranges from off of a tree that someone else thought was theirs. So these are not common, like I said, and as you get to know our clients, you might hear those. Finally, there is trauma in relocation. There can be depression after resettlement, and our services do work to address this. It's a very stressful experience moving to a new place. You don't know the language, or maybe you don't have those ties, or as strong of ties as you had back in your home country. So we provide integration and provide an atmosphere of belonging so they feel like they do belong here. We make sure that our clients understand pathways to citizenship and what steps need to be taken to encourage active citizenship. We also try to create mental health services for adults and children. And if we don't offer counseling, we can connect them with that if they need it. This is a lot to go through, but there are some things that are really important. So it's important to remember that not everyone is affected may arrive and have depression or anxiety when they're moving back, or they may not have extreme trauma from transitioning to the United States. And it's important to remember that most youth, children, and even adults who experience traumatic events may not have significant mental health issues afterwards, but some do continue to struggle. There are a couple of things that are important to remember when working with our clients. So the first is cultural awareness. A lot of our clients can be very guarded and have hard times making friends and adjusting to life here. So we do ask that you as a volunteer are respectful and understanding of their traditions that our clients come from, because they have a different understanding than we do. So one easy way to do this, especially, is to keep in mind what you are wearing, especially if you're a female volunteer or with another female one-on-one, or if you're a male meeting with a female one-on-one. There are some power dynamics that we want to be aware of so our clients know that we have their best interests in mind. We also want you to keep in mind that we are not a faith-based organization. We encourage sharing of your stories and the sharing of our client stories. We also ask that you leave the telling of the client's story up to the client. If they want to tell you their story, they will over time. If we ask too soon, the family or client may shut down because they're not ready and be less willing to interact with our services, or maybe want to leave the program. So going back to this not a faith-based organization, you are definitely allowed to share your beliefs, but don't try to convert clients. There's a big difference between sharing your customs and pressuring others to do the same. This can be done unintentionally, so just be cognizant. We've had complaints where families asked to be removed from the care of our volunteers because they felt that they were being proselytized. I do not believe that was the volunteers' actual intention, but it can come off that way. Many of our clients are Muslim, and many of our clients are also Christian. So one thing that is important, that is different, is that Christianity in some parts of the world are heavily influenced by other religions. So one example is Christianity in the Congo. There are differently conceived values because of the Muslim influence there. So this sharing versus converting can be a fine line. It is important that you are aware, because we have built a really solid reputation over the past 15 years of trauma-informed, culturally aware, and client-focused care. A lot of times we walk into homes or we call somebody, we let them know that, yeah, I work with NICE and I'm welcomed into homes and I'm able to have a lot of really amazing conversations. And it's because we are very careful and cognizant of what we say and how we respect values. So just keep that in mind. All right, so hopefully you guys have all completed a volunteer application. I think most of you have, and if not, I'm going to send you an application in my follow-up email tomorrow. This is really important so we know what skills you have, we can match you with the best opportunity for you and our clients, what you're interested in, and even what your schedule is. So I'm going to review your application. I'm going to send you a background check, and then depending on what program you want to go into, there's going to be further training. So there's a different training for mentorship and adult education that you will need to go through. Yes, so if you are in the education department, I'm going to hold those trainings for you. If you're in other departments, like in health or employment, your supervisor will do that. And they have kind of department-specific training that I unfortunately am not fluent in. But I am involved in our education, different education departments, and go to classes and help teach. So I am more familiar with those programs. So after this orientation, I will work on placing you in the position that fits you best. In my email tomorrow, I'm going to let you know of what opportunities we currently have. At the moment, honestly, for the rest of this session until December 11th, all of our needs are filled. So most of the openings are going to be again in January. And that's when I will be able to place you. We luckily have had a lot of support from volunteers and a lot of enthusiasm over our programs, which is amazing. But there's only so many positions available in some of our programs. So once again, in the spring semester, there's going to be more. So you might be placed, especially if you are in adult or youth education, not mentorship. If you're an adult education or the after school program, you might be placed next in January. Around January 7th is when the next session starts. And I'm going to send you the dates for those trainings. I know we're going to have a youth mentorship training next week on Tuesday. And so if you're interested in that, you can let me know that in that email tomorrow. I'm also going to set you up with a Track It Forward account so you can record your volunteer hours. It is very important that you do this. A lot of our funding is based off of volunteer hours, and that we're able to prove that we end up actually saving tons of money from people like you and your dedication to what we're doing. So this is the Track It Forward webpage. This is what you're essentially going to see. Your time is very valuable, and like I said, when you report your volunteer hours, we can report that to our donors. If people actually recorded their hours, we could meet the match on all of our grants by volunteer hours alone. So it is really important that you do that. I'm going to set you up with an account. You're going to get an email from Track It Forward with your account information, and I will help you troubleshoot. But after you're placed in your program, your supervisor might check in every once in a while to make sure that you're recording your hours. I do actually do volunteer newsletters, which is really exciting. I just started them, but I convert the hours that you guys do to actual cash to see what we have saved and what your time has contributed to our organization. So the more that you're able to do that, the more I can see what our volunteers have been contributing. So it's pretty easy to use. You essentially just select your hours and the date you volunteered and the activity. Like if you're in mentorship, you'll hit youth mentorship. If you're an adult education volunteer, adult education. If you are in adult education, we do ask that you timestamp your hours just for donors. They want to make sure and know what classes you're going to. So you would just say, I volunteered from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Tuesday. You know, I should have to say Tuesday, it says there, but just 6 to 7. So it's pretty easy to use. Oh, actually, we're supposed to skip this page, but it's okay. So these are mostly our different volunteers that we're going to be having. Like I said, they're all full right now, but they will have some more openings later. So we have unique circumstances, as you all know. People are still trying to figure out how to best use volunteers in a time when we're not having more than 3 people in the office at a time. So if you are available in person, we can set you up with personal protective equipment. If you're interested, especially being a youth mentor and you want to go to houses, we can do that for you. So we have the youth mentorship program, which I am actually collecting volunteers for. You will be placed with our mentorship coordinator with the family one-on-one. I'm going, like I said, going to describe these in more detail in the email tomorrow, but we also have the Youth After School Instructor, which is a program that I'm a part of, and I love it. It's for middle school students. Students come after school, and we do different games, like educational games, and help teach them social emotional learning skills, reading. A lot of our students, it can be a challenge because a lot of our students come from different levels. So today I was working with a student teaching him the alphabet, whereas another student was doing a science experiment and is able to speak in complete English. So it's an interesting group of people, and we're learning to adjust to that. We also are actually having a new program starting in January, the Adult Esl Tutors. So it's a flexible schedule, and you're going to be set up with a student who their teacher recommends that they have extra help. And you could work with them one-on-one to support them, give them extra English practice, help them learn something they're not getting in class, kind of whatever that needs. And we're developing that right now. And so there is going to be a separate training for that as well. Eventually, not there yet. We also have the Adult ESL tech support and in-class. They're kind of not just tech support, but also like in-class volunteers. So a lot of times our teachers use breakout rooms. So Adult ESL's volunteers will be with the students in breakout rooms, leading activities and supporting the teacher as the clients are navigating being online. A lot of our clients may not have access to, or great access or frequent access to internet, or Zoom, anything like that. So it can be a challenge if they are taking classes, learning how to navigate those platforms. So you would also be helping with that in addition to helping teach the classes. So these are our volunteer requirements. We do ask that you commit to volunteering at least once a week. It's not actually usually 2 to 3 hours, it depends on the program you're in. I would say it's probably 1 to 2. If you are in mentorship, it's about a 2-hour commitment a week. If you're in adult education or youth education, it's 1 hour a week. However, if you want to volunteer more, we love volunteers. We will happily accept you, and you can come in and volunteer as much as you want. We ask that you volunteer for at least 9 weeks. It's a pretty, because our clients experience a lot of transience, it's important that you come and are committed to seeing them succeed. We do have some exceptions to the 9-week rule, but we just really want to make sure that you're committed to helping our clients and are there for them when they need it. So the final next is be punctual. Let us know if you're going to miss your shift. We prefer that you let us know about 48 hours in advance. We have a list of substitute teachers, especially if you're in adult education, and a lot of our teachers rely on our volunteers to make sure the classes running smoothly for activities. So if you aren't going to make it, it's really, really important that you let us know. And I have been asked in all of our teacher meetings to really emphasize this, because some of our volunteers don't let us know about an hour before class, and that is not helpful. If you have an emergency, we understand, but typically just let us know early. And then please follow nice volunteer dress code requirements. And the office as an employee, I'm supposed to dress business casual. You definitely do not have to do that. I would just say, keep in mind what we talked about earlier, covering up your shoulders, wearing things that maybe have more coverage, be respectful of different religions, and kind of imagine what you think that they would want to see, what was like normal for them, and copy that on your own dress. So we want you to stay engaged with our clients and our students. So don't use your cell phones, obviously, while in class or trying to offer services. It's disrespectful, and we just want to make sure they know that we care. You're going to want to maintain client and student confidentiality and privacy. Don't share information that is not necessarily your story if you're don't have explicit permission. And this kind of goes the same with the no photography rule. Same kind of thing. We just want to make sure our clients are safe and not being exploited in any way. So no photography unless permission is given by a nice staff member, and that goes for stories as well, or at least names with stories. If there are any problems, report to a nice staff member. We are pretty experienced and know how to kind of handle a lot of these peculiar situations. And if you reach out to me or your supervisor or your teacher in the classroom, we will know how to take care of that. We're trained pretty heavily in that as well. All right, so this is the volunteer code of conduct. So while volunteering for NICE, we expect our volunteers to be respectful and courteous to others at all times. It is important that our children's and families' experience is a positive one. If at any time a volunteer is seen or believed to be engaging in the behaviors here, they are going to be dismissed. So we ask that you do not bring any weapons of any kind at all to locations that are sponsored by NICE. We ask that you come not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Obviously, do not give minors cigarettes or alcohol or drugs or anything like that. It is definitely frowned upon to give cigarettes from adult to a minor. Do not engage in abusive, violent, or threatening behavior or language towards clients, staff, or other volunteers. And once again, be respectful of cultures and cultural differences. Any intentional damage, destruction, or misuse of NICE property, we do have a limited budget, so we want to take care of everything that we have and show the same respect to our clients and by giving them and providing them with resources that are sorry, my dog's barking, got distracted, that are in good condition. No forms of sexual harassment or any theft or removal of NICE property without permission. So as I said earlier, if you do come into a case where you are going to need to report child abuse or anything that's quite serious, you can let us know. And Tennessee is a mandatory reporting state. So interpartner violence, child abuse, behavior abuse, you don't have to necessarily call, but you can let us know if you suspect anything. We have connections to people and organizations, non-uniformed officers who deal with abuse, counseling centers, parenting centers. We can be kind of liaison in those cases. If you feel led, you can of course report it yourself, and we have some instructions. I have access to this information, and so do our supervisors. So if you want to report, just ask and we can give you this information as well. You can fill out the report online. When we fill out a report for you, we typically do it a pre-phone call to explain the context, write the report, and submit it as an online version. If we can provide any context that might help keep kids with their families, when a family may not just need to be culturally aware of abuse and what is considered abuse in the United States. So we just want to make sure that they know that, and we want to keep families together as much as possible. So we just ask that if you do fill it out, fill out the form, just make sure to provide that context so nothing's taken out of proportion. So we always explain our rights and responsibilities. So your rights as a volunteer are to have a safe and healthy work environment, understand your role, receive orientation and training, which is what you're doing right now. If you are given a task that you're not comfortable with, let us know. We do not want you to do something you're not comfortable with. The more comfortable you are, the better you'll end up doing the task, and the more it'll impact our clients. You have a right to be free of exploitation. You are not our slaves, even though you're working for free. Just kidding. And your personal information is kept confidential. So your responsibilities are to be reliable and punctual, serve willingly, ask for support when needed, respect others and confidentiality, complete agreed upon tasks to the best of your abilities, participate in necessary trainings, and be safe. So if you're in this orientation and you're hearing all this and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I really want to be involved directly with clients, that's okay. There are a lot of other ways to be involved. We love when our volunteers or people who are interested advocate for refugees in our community. If you want to speak to different community groups, or we want us to speak at different community groups about NICE and our mission, we definitely can do that. We love bake sales and donation drives. And you can always follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Not entirely sure what corporate volunteer grants are, but that's okay. And you can support us through shopping. We have an Amazon Smile account. And if you want to donate, we do have buttons on our home screen, so you can donate to us there. Okay, so the next step, I am going to reach out to you and give you the background check and all the information tomorrow in an email. And I'm going to schedule any other trainings that you're going to need. Like I said, youth mentorship training is next Tuesday, and you're going to receive an email confirming your placement and staff contact after those trainings and after we get your background check back. And you need to let your vacation or supervisor know if you have any vacation time that you need to take. Okay, yeah, that's it. Those are our next steps. So like I said, I'm going to send you an email tomorrow with a little bit more information about what we have available, and next steps, how to register for that mentorship training, and any other information I'm going to need to know. Do we have any questions? And if you have something more specific to you, I can say after, and I'd be happy to answer it. All right, no questions. Awesome. Well, that's all I have today. So thank you so much for coming, and I look forward to working with you guys and getting to know you. We do have a lot of different events or try to have a lot of different events, even though we're virtual right now for volunteers. So I'm excited to get to know you all and enjoy working with you, so you can help our clients and have some amazing stories to tell. So, oh, I think maybe a chat. Let's see. All right, yeah. All right, great. Thank you so much for coming, and I will email you guys tomorrow.